Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Canon Unscripted. My name is Mason Higa, and welcome to the show. We're glad to have you with us. This is a brand new show by Canon USA, and it's an opportunity for us to sit down with some of our favorite photographers, filmmakers, and creatives to talk about what makes them click and how they've pursued their passions, which evolved into their careers. And of course, since this is a Canon show, we talk about the Canon gear that they use to bring their vision to life. To find out more about all the products that we talk about, please go to usa.canon.com and subscribe to our socials to keep up with the latest and greatest. Today on the podcast, our special guest is Canon Explorers of Light, Laretta Houston. She's a fashion, beauty, advertising, and portrait photographer based in Los Angeles. Her client list runs the full spectrum of celebrities, networks, TVs, print, and major brands. She's had an incredible career, and we talk about her humble beginnings to traveling the world as a professional photographer. And most importantly, Laretta is a fighter, and her can-do spirit is what really sets her apart. I had an incredible time during our conversation, and I hope you enjoy the show. Without further ado, here's my unscripted talk with Laretta Houston.
I swear there might have been like 10 people on that call. 10 people. I was like a little overwhelmed. And he said, we're looking at you being the first female photographer to shoot for Sports Illustrated swimsuit. And the first black one. I said, what? I don't even shoot swimsuits.
Laretta, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know, I'm so excited actually to really, and you know what? Also too, folks, if you haven't noticed, this is our new set here at our Costa Mesa location. And Laretta is our first guest.
I am honored to be here. So
we're honored
thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming down. You know, it's like we were given the choice, like who should we have as our first guest here? And immediately Tony and I said, Laretta, we got to have you here.
Yup.
Because again, we were so, I think both of us were really excited when you were announced as one of our Explorers of Light. Because again, you're this incredible photographer that needs to be known, you know, because we see your work. And when I first saw your work, I was like, wow, this is amazing work. And so I'm so happy that you're part of the Canon family now. So you became a EOL what year?
So that was 2021.
Right.
So it was right after a little bit of the COVID, you know. And so I just decided to join this audio app online. And, you know, photographers would invite me on stage to talk about myself or the gigs I've had or, you know, what it's like to work with Tyra. You know, what is it like to work with an agency for photographers? The questions that were not being answered by other people. So during that time, you know, I saw a few Canon people pop up. And so I was like, are they really watching me on here? Because you could see everybody's name. And so there were like a lot of Canon people there. And before I know it, maybe about like a couple weeks later, I got an email. And said, hey, Laretta, we'd like to talk to you about an opportunity. And that's how it got all started.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's great. Just because of, things happen, right, in life. And boom, there you go.
Yeah, it was a really strange time because, you know, as photographers, if we don't work, we get into, you know, our mind, anxiety and depression. And that gave us an opportunity to talk with other photographers, share skills, share knowledge, share mistakes. Because we're human beings too, we make mistakes. And it was just such a great time, even though it was not a great time health-wise, it's a great time to actually get close to the community of photographers and, you know, just talk to them, you know, and it was just, I would never take that back. You know, I got to know a lot of people during that time.
Yeah, it was actually a really interesting reset in life.
It was.
Right?
And it was my first time actually speaking. Because I never really spoke a lot, and you know, other than being on set, you know. So to really talk about myself was like eye-opening for me. So I tried to join the app also to basically practice in speaking in front of audience, whether it be audio or in person. So yeah, it took some time, but I did it, and Canon, you know, showed up. They saw my personality. Someone was on stage too. I can't remember who it was. but it was a Canon. He was up there asking a question. So when the person asked a question to the Canon person that was on stage, he answered the question and he turned around and said, "Who is Laretta? Like, who is this lady?" And so I'm like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I want to know more about you. I find you very interesting." And so from there, that was it. I got an email from Canon, said, "We have an opportunity, let's talk." And I got on a video call, and I swear there might have been like 10 people on that call. 10 people. I was like a little overwhelmed. But yeah, they asked me specific questions. Was I always a Canon lover? Of course.
Oh, of course.
Of course, since day one.
Yeah.
I've been in this almost 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Okay, 19 years?
Yeah, 19 years.
Wow.
Oh, I'm a Canon true lover.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started with the Mark II. And then I built up over the years when I can afford to buy another camera. So yeah, I've been part of the family a long time ago before I was even noticed.
That's cool. But I mean, 19 years, you've done a lot in the 19 years, right?
I have. I've learned a lot. I've laughed a lot. I cried a lot. But all in all, the journey has been great.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You never know how the journey is until you actually come to a certain point where you're secure with yourself and the knowledge that you have and say, yeah, I came a long way.
Right.
Like you used to do stupid stuff as a kid, right? But then once you get mature, you're like, I was really dumb during that time. You know what I'm saying? So, there's a lot of lessons I've learned, and I built my creativity over the years, my skills over the years through a lot of trials and tribulations, you know what I'm saying? I've lost clients, I've gained clients, and each one of them I lost, I got to know a little bit about myself more.
Sure.
I think as far as an artist is concerned, we really need to do a deep diving into ourselves. We're not here, most of us, as artists, we're not here to please people. We're here to showcase our art and what we really think of it. Whenever an artist puts out their work, whether it be a photographer or a painter, there is a sense of themselves in every picture, every painting, every brush that they pick up. If you really dig deep into their work, you will see them. And I think people don't realize that. They skim through their work. It's like, oh, that's a great picture. How did they do that? But in reality, you don't do your research on the photographer and what they've been through. Do you ask the personal questions of how they became a photographer or why they stayed in it so long? I think that's a little something that we're missing to this day.
How do you measure success? I mean, again, 19 years has gone by pretty quick, right? I mean, but
longevity.
The longevity, right?
Yeah.
All right.
It takes a little bit of business and artistic and skills to get where you need to be. You have to know all three.
Yeah.
I remember a photographer told me, he was like, you're not a real photographer unless you do natural and in studio and you know both. And at one time I was all nature. Like I need the sun. The sun was my lighting. And I didn't know how to shoot in studio. And then I started shooting in studio. And then once I developed that skill, I went back to him. I said, now I'm a professional photographer. I know both. And he started laughing. He said, I agree.
All right, there you go.
So I certain things that photographers tell me, I remember because it's one of those aha moments, and you remember those moments. So, yeah.
I mean, realistically, it's in that sense, having those skill sets just make you a better photographer in any way.
Of
right?
course.
I mean, so you again, like your clientele is like the full gamut as well. I mean, you've done Sports Illustrated, ABC.
Yep, Tyra Banks.
Right? I mean, and then even like lifestyle and commercial. So you've done a lot of work and you've got this incredible skill set. Tell us more about like how do you achieve all of that?
It takes years to get there. You have to start at the bottom.
Yeah.
You got to do your work. And collaborations with people to get where you need to go. You can't be an artist by yourself. There's a team behind you. Yes, you take pictures, you may take portraits by yourself, but you still need the subject there. So I think throughout the years of being, it's almost 19 years. I struggled as a photographer starting in this industry. It is a male-driven industry. So as a female photographer, I wanted to break the doors down. Not open, I wanted to kick them out. I want to be able to be a voice for female photographers out there, especially Black female photographers. I don't think we see a lot of that here in the industry. So it is great that Canon is showcasing a lot more diversity in their Canon EOLs and the people who work there.
Absolutely.
So I started my photography off of a stupid breakup. Yes, a relationship breakup. Yeah. So I used to be a graphic designer.
That explains a lot. We'll get to it. But again, your images are so creative and graphic. I mean, that's like really is what attracted to me. But again, we'll get to that.
I think it's a sense of nurturing that. Like, so if you have any background in, design or graphic, it kind of helps because you already did half the job now. You know what I'm saying? As far as like colors, what looks good together. So it helped. So back then it used to be called visual communications before it said, graphic design. I went to school for about 2 years and then, young and dumb, I decided like, I'm not going to go to school anymore. So I decided to take off like a good 2 years, not actually 5. So I went through this stage of, I'm not going to be an artist. I'm going to be in the working field. So I decided to go to school for barber.
Yeah.
I wanted to have an all-female barber shop.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I was like, this would be freaking great, all-female. I wanted to brand that, and I went to school and didn't even finish the degree. Then I decided, you know what? I'm going to open a gift basket business.
Gift basket?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I got laid off during the .com era.
Okay. Way back in the, okay.
Yeah. So, you exactly know how old I am. Okay. So I got laid off during that time. And so I had to find an income. So I decided to open a gift basket company. And Yahoo was one of my clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was great. So I had a fun time, and then I decided to go back into the work field, and I had a degree in multimedia and design. So developing websites and designing them. So there was a lot to learn. So I went back in the force, after I got laid off, and decided to go back into web design and development. And I was getting laid off over and over again, and because they weren't really hiring photographers full time. They were either on contracts so they didn't have to pay the medical part.
Sure.
Insurance,
added
right?
benefits, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they were just laying people left and right. So I got laid off again, and I knew this guy who actually owned his own web design company. I was only ran by him and some contractors. So I worked with him for a little while. And then I started taking pictures on my lunch break. And again, that was off a stupid, women cry. I was picking up the camera. I was like, I'm not crying for another relationship. I'm going to pick up this camera. I'm going to start shooting.
Yeah.
So at that time I was working for another company who I was a web designer for. And at lunchtime, I would actually go out there and shoot. So I would shoot cars. I was into rusted things. So, I would shoot items, old faucets, old, cars that were rusted, old bugs, the bugs, the beetles.
Oh, okay.
Flowers, it was just a thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I remember when I came back and I had a boyfriend, and he said, you don't shoot people very well. You need to stick to what you know. Oh boy. 6 months later, we were done. We were done. And, I was like, I'm not going to make that my story.
Yeah.
So I started shooting people. So of course, everybody know Model Mayhem. We all model. We know Model Mayhem.
Everybody does.
Yes.
At a certain age,
Yes.
everybody knows.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of found my models. I was on Flickr. So Flickr was really good back in the day for a lot of photographers to showcase their work. So I would get my models from Model Mayhem and start shooting during that time. And I remember asking this professional photographer, what camera are you using? He said, the best camera you can ever use is a Canon.
Hey, there you go.
No buts. I went straight to Best Buy and bought my first Canon camera.
Wow.
So at that point, you know, I couldn't afford it. So I put everything on a credit card. I'm like, yeah, I'm professional now. I got the Canon camera. I'm professional. So so I just started taking pictures during the lunch break and shooting kids. And then it went into the artistic part. So, you know, I started hiring models from Model Mayhem and doing all kind of crazy stuff, throwing coffee on them, throwing sugar on them, honey over their head. Like I was just doing everything and anything. Okay.
You were experimenting.
I was experimenting.
Yeah.
And, that was, I mean, squid on, you know, I put an octopus on somebody's head. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know
do you still have those photos?
I still do. I actually stumbled upon it like a couple months ago, and I was just
Insert
like,
here.
Here. And I was like, Laretta, what was you thinking?
Yeah.
Like, so I went straight to an Asian market and picked out a whole octopus and put it on the guy's head and took pictures of it. Oh, the good old days. So yeah, and then during that time, I had some. So there was an agent, a model agent, who approached me and said he wanted to open up a photographer's agency. So I agreed to be one of the photographers. And I remember he said, yeah, Laretta, let's talk. And I'm like, okay. So I come over and he said, I want you to we're looking at you being the first female photographer to shoot for Sports Illustrated swimsuit and the first Black one. I said, what? You kidding me, right? And he's like, no, they have never had a female photographer shoot for the magazine, and they never had a Black photographer.
Wow.
So I'm like, I told him that's never going to happen. Like, I don't even shoot swimsuits, you know? Like, that's never going to happen. So it's funny because fast forward 10 years later, I get a call from Sports Illustrated Swimsuit. You know,
You got the call.
Yeah, so I got a call. So, you know, I don't know if it was like a manifestation, you know, whatever you say comes to light. But I remember having that conversation. And so in between that time, you know, I was shooting in Atlanta. And, you know, slowly you have to gather your team. So it's just not you and the subject. You're going to have to add makeup artists, you know, hairstylists, stylists. And it's really hard to find a really good makeup artist or hairstylist and stylist. They have to match your style as a photographer.
Personality, work ethic.
Yeah, not just that, like who you are as a photographer. You know, you as a makeup artist, you can't go to a photographer and say, I want this glam when they don't even shoot glam. So it was really hard to find that one makeup artist who can be just as creative as I am. Because everybody kind of played down their makeup during that time. So it's just really hard to find teams, but when you find a solid team, that's who you need to work with. So I was in that journey on finding the perfect team, right? So, you know, I got a makeup artist, hairstylist. You know, I didn't have a stylist during that time. So I became the stylist. So part of what I enjoy, even to this day, is going shopping for models. I even had clients who actually hired me to be their stylist.
Yeah.
For a shoot, yes.
All right.
And I think you know, I used to travel back and forth between New York and Atlanta, and that's how I gained the skills to kind of like know what's great and what looks good together. You know, and so I just started styling models until I had a great stylist. But yeah, you know, I think it took me so the first 5 years of being a photographer, you know, I actually had a full-time job.
Okay.
And then I decided after I got laid off so many times that, okay, Laretta, you need to start doing photography and make it more serious. You know what I'm saying? And really try to make it a business. So I got to the point where I was making a certain amount of money that I can actually quit my full-time job.
Right.
So my theory is, if you want to open up a business, especially in photography, and you have a full-time job, you need to make twice as much as you make in your full-time job in order to be a full-time photographer. And I base that on security. You know, a lot of artists kind of like jump in it and don't realize like you need a little bit of money to be a photographer, you know, to kind of try and make it. So, and then I became a full-time photographer after 8 years into photography, and I never looked back. I haven't had a full-time job since then.
It's amazing. I mean, it's not a overnight success story. It's this is how you put the work in, and something that's like being a responsible person, right? I mean,
yeah. And we had our slow months, like slow years. I remember I had a real bad slow year. And I was like, has it come to this point where I'm actually going to PetSmart and getting an application? And I filled out the whole application, and they denied me and said, you're overqualified for PetSmart. I couldn't believe that. I'm like, really? Yeah, you're overqualified.
It's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
right?
But that was a real tough year for me.
Yeah.
I don't know what was happening. Clients were hiring me. It just went downhill. And I never really thought that it would actually stay being a photographer this long. You know, it's 19 years now.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a struggle. You know,
Right.
there's many times that I cried during that year, trying to figure out how I was going to pay rent, you know, how I was going to afford my camera gear. You know, it's just really a sad year. But, you know, I've been through a lot of trauma in my life. You know, I, born and raised, if nobody knows, I was born and raised in the Philippines. I'm half Black and half Filipino. Okay. So, English was not my first language. Tagalog was. And I had a rough childhood. I came from an abusive home and later got put into a foster care once we moved from the Philippines to the United States in California. And during that time, you know, I had to be acquainted with United States. Like, I didn't know about like, you know, Kool-Aid. Like, what is Kool-Aid?
Sure.
And I remember somebody said, you need, you know, taste grape with lemonade and you'll love it, right? My first time tasting lemonade, Kool-Aid, hot dog with chili. What was McDonald's? Like, we didn't have that in the Philippines. Like, I didn't know any of that. So everything was really brand new to me. Like, just the food that everybody ate, like pizza. What's pizza? We didn't grow with that in the Philippines.
Right.
So my father was in the Air Force, so he would go back and forth in TDY. And, you know, I would, my mother would always have us go to the provinces. And the provinces is where pretty much where the low income Filipinos would stay. And these were houses built out of like bamboo, and you know, we had the steel rooftop, and you know, we actually lived under mosquito nets. You know, so and heat was the trash can in the morning. And as you know, Filipinos, we don't eat with spoons; we eat with our hands.
Right.
So you know, all of that I got taught during those times. I knew what it was like to live poorly with no lights, with no air conditioner, no heating, any of that. The only thing I had was the TV. But that was my entertainment during that time. So yeah, when we moved to the United States, you know, I was put in foster care. My father remarried another lady, which was, you know, it was a real struggle for me.
Yeah.
I stayed in foster care for a number of years. And after a while, my foster mother actually kind of manipulated me into working and giving her my whole check, even though she was getting paid from the state. She also had a gambling addiction too as well. So when she would actually gamble, I would be the one who watched the other kids. So it wasn't really a good environment to be raised. It's kind of like a little toxic. So I remember one day it was snowing really hard in Seattle. So during this time, I was in Seattle. I had some friends, and I remember snowing one day. It was snowing really bad, and I was out there, and I had the biggest snowman ever, and we're throwing, snowballs at each other. And I remember that was like the best time I've had in years. I remember not wanting to go back to my foster mother. It got to the point where she wanted me to pay her just to wash my clothes. Wow. Even though the washing machine dryer was there and I was able to actually wash my own clothes. So, that was not an environment that I wanted to be in. And it made me really sad and depressed. And so I went from family to family, stayed, couch, what do you call it? Couch surfing with friends and people they knew. And so I was not able to stay in certain places for more than a week. So this was going on for about a good 6 months. And then finally, I decided to go back to school. So I went to community college, and I met a couple people there that became my friends. And they wanted to move down to Atlanta. I couldn't afford to move to Atlanta. Like, I don't even know, anything to do with life, period, right? So I took $500 in one suitcase and moved to Atlanta. And that's when I started working at the grocery stores. I mean, there were times that I didn't have money where I would just eat grits because that was the cheapest thing I can buy, and it made me, full.
Full, sure.
And that's where I actually went back to school for, graphic design and, multimedia. So, I came from a background where I knew exactly what being poor looked like, what it felt like, being on the streets, being alone, having no family. It was really hard.
Sure.
It was really hard. Like I said I wouldn't cry about this.
I should have brought a tissue box.
I'm
going to start to cry. I mean,
it was just really a hard time for me.
Yeah.
But I just, when I look back at that time, I am the success story for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I didn't end up on drugs. I did not end up, staying on the streets or doing other things to make money. So, it was just a time where I can reflect on and just say, you know what, Laretta, you did it.
Yeah.
You overcame that part of your life.
That amount of adversity, that you had to, right, that you conquered.
Yes.
It's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I mean, really,
if I'm going to share my
incredible.
story, I need to share everything.
Sure.
For people to be inspired or to say, I went through that, or somebody that they can relate to. Right. Everybody doesn't have a perfect life, and so, yeah. So during that time, living in Atlanta, again, finding a perfect team, I just worked really hard on trying to perfect my skills in photography and lighting. So basically I started working, shooting for magazines. And during that time, they weren't really paying photographers for magazines. And some magazines still to this day do not pay for photographers. We like editorial, but in reality, editorial does not pay. So unless you have the income as a photographer to keep up your lifestyle and still shoot editorial, you're good. But most of us photographers need to learn how to pay our rent, right? Mm-hmm. So I shot fashion and beauty for such a long time. And I remember this one photographer, I can't remember her name, but I was watching her online, and she basically said that she was a fashion beauty photographer beforehand, before she became a advertising commercial photographer. And she said she decided, I'm going to take this one job and see how it feels to be an advertising commercial photographer. And when she did the job, and she saw that first check hit her bank account, and I think she said she made like $15,000 for that one day.
Wow.
She never looked back. And she shoots for Macy's, she shoots for Nordstrom's, she shoots their campaigns. So it was great to see that and hear it. And that's when I decided to kind of like bring advertising commercial into the world of my fashion and beauty as well.
Do you remember what your first paid gig was, and that, like, how did it make you feel?
So my first client was Spanx, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yes. And I remember they hired me through my agent. And I was so nervous because it was my first campaign. I think they paid me like $6,000 to shoot for that one day. And we had to shoot it on location at a like specific house and shoot the models there. And I was just so nervous because I feel like I didn't really have the equipment to properly execute the shoot. And I was questioned on the lenses that I was shooting with. I was questioned on the camera I was shooting with. And I remember telling like, oh no, I'm not, Canon's what I shoot with. You know, these are the lenses I shoot with. You know, I had to stand and be stern about the products that I used at the shoot.
How come? What was?
I think it's because the other photographers they shot with were using other
Different things.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
doing different. The way they shot, the gear they shot with, you know, it was different from mine. But yeah, Spanx was a great campaign to start with. Great group of people that worked there at Spanx. The creative director was great. I remember he actually had like a certain type of monkey that he had for a pet. It was the weirdest thing. It was just weird. And he was from Europe. So I remember that part. But yeah, and you know, from there I started shooting other campaigns like off-Broadway shoes. You know, I started shooting hair campaigns there. And so word of mouth was starting to get around.
I was just going to ask, how did you start building word of mouth, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't even advertising. It was not marketing. My website was not really good as far as SEO. So it was word of mouth. And to this day, it's still word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I say if you work with a client and they love you, they will go ahead and refer you to everybody and anybody. That's how you're really going to get those really reoccurring clients. Because at that point, if someone says they trust you, then they're going to come and hire you because their clients said they trust you. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I gained my clients throughout the years.
Do the work, meet the deadlines.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Set etiquette.
Yeah, and still make mistakes. So every time I went to a campaign and made a mistake, and even if it's something I only knew, I knew not to do it again.
Got to learn from that experience. Right?
Oh yeah, it was a hard lesson.
Yeah.
I also remember having a campaign, and I had a digital tech during that time. You know, 2 assistants, you know, PAs, producer, all of it was big gig. And I remember the digital tech came in, and he was like, "My car was stolen this morning." And I'm like, "Okay." He was already 30 minutes late. His car was stolen. And so what he did is set up, he was also talking to, you know, police station, the police department, you know, giving them questions, giving them answers to their questions about his car being stolen. So he wasn't really focused on the shoot, right? It was almost the end of the day, and I happened to go to the station, and I looked, and I said, this cannot be. Everything was like 13 megapixels.
Oh, no.
And part of these pictures supposed to be on a billboard.
Yeah.
My heart sank. And I really was trying to figure out how I was going to explain this to my client. Like, how am I explaining that we actually went throughout the day and didn't have enough megapixels on these pictures for it to be blown up?
Yeah.
For in-store, you know, advertising, packaging, and billboard.
Right.
And I remember telling the creative director, and her eyes were just, if eyes can hurt, I was cut.
Yeah.
I was cut to the core, blood, everything, right? And I remember her saying, "What do you mean?" And I said, we shot everything under, 15 megapixels. And luckily she saved the shoot. And luckily the billboard part was done at the end. So we're able to salvage that, right?
All right. Yeah.
But I lost that client.
Yeah. It's a tough lesson.
It was a very tough lesson. And I remember 2 years had passed and I decided to write the creative director on LinkedIn and literally just apologize and tell them exactly what happened. And she came back and she said, why didn't you tell me that it wasn't your fault? I just thought that I should take the blame for everything because it is my shoot. I am the photographer, right?
Yeah.
But when I told her the truth, she hired me again for several campaigns after that.
Look at that.
So, you know,
Wow.
you make mistakes, but it's always great to apologize for them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people forget to apologize about their mistakes and walk as if nothing happened. And you wonder why you don't have returning clients. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we have to apologize and own up to our own mistakes in that. And usually people forgive and they usually hire you back. So
especially if you do great work.
Yes. So that was a big lesson for me. Big lesson.
I mean, there's so many like little like nuanced stories that I'm hearing here. Again, like, you know, determination, hard work, but also like how does like happenstance, you know, and luck, like do you believe in that? Again, like the manifestation, you know, I mean,
I'm an epitome of luck. You know, like sometimes I wonder how did I get this job or, you know, this client, or how did I get off the streets? You know, how did I, you know, get away from all these things that were, you know, were very traumatic to me when I was a child or a teenager. And I fear it's a sense of, you know, faith.
Yeah.
It is a sense of manifestation and a little bit of sprinkle of luck.
Yeah.
You know, and I can say I was lucky for a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know,
got that little guardian angel there with you, right?
That's what I'm talking about. I got two. I got two.
and it's so funny too, because again, like you've had all these like different like careers, right? Or like different things that you were doing. So why did you stick with photography?
I don't know. I feel like when I picked up the camera, I really loved creating.
Yeah.
When I picked up the camera, I was at one of my lowest points in life. And taking pictures really got me out of the house. It was my outlet to create something that I wanted to express to the audience, you know? So believe it or not, I was shooting all dark stuff, you know, like all dark lighting, all dark backgrounds. It was always black, you know? And I realized when I look back at that work, I was really in a depressed state during that time. And now you look at my work, everything's white, everything's bright, you know? So when you compare your work to what you had then and what you have now, you can actually see your growth too as well. Not just skills and creativity, but your maturity in handling your anxiety or depression,
creativity,
your
creativity,
creativity,
what you're trying to convey. Right?
Yes, exactly. So I think as photographers, when we go through something, it's something great there when we want to express what we're feeling in that photography, in that creativity that we make every day. I enjoy changing people. I remember this girl, she was a model, and a professional model, she was signed. And I told her, I said, you know, you would look better if your hair is cut. She was like, what do you mean? African, you know, she's a black model. And I said, you don't really need to wear your weave. And she was like, I don't understand. I was like, you won't be seen differently if you wear a weave. You will be more recognized off your natural look. So I remember her crying and said, I don't want to, you know, cut my hair. And so I think everybody convinced her to cut her hair. And I remember when we started cutting her hair, she started crying. So it was like kind of like a little bit of America's Top Model when, you know, the models would have to change their hair or color or cut it and they would cry.
The dramatic
Yeah, it was
change.
very dramatic transformation, right? And she cried. We took out the weave out. We, did her natural hair properly, and we shot her. And since then, she's made money. She's been on billboards. She's been on campaign. She's just everywhere now. And so that's what I love. I like to say that if I can bring one good thing out of a model every time I shoot them and change their life, that's what I live for.
Or you're giving back, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just not my creativity. I think it's based on what you can do to help the person, inspire them to be better or to ever think differently of themselves.
So when you get on set, I mean, how much time do you take to really connect with the models?
2 hours.
2 hours?
Well, no, let's just
okay.
say this.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I'm on a campaign, the first 2 hours is about building the set, the gear, the lighting, all of that. Of course, I have assistants who do that. So I don't really have to touch lighting anymore. I got to the point where I can actually show up to a campaign and don't have to lift anything. Mm-hmm. I just tell them exactly what I want, the lighting wise, what I want the picture to look like, show them the mood, show them the concept, and make it work. Mm-hmm. Now, I still have the skills to change the lighting, so I have no problem moving lights or changing them or saying, hey, I rather prefer this type of lighting or this modifier, right?
Well, you're being a director at that point, right? I mean, not just a photographer, but like a director as well.
You got
too.
it.
Right.
You got it.
Yeah.
So I started perfecting my art direction.
Right.
And so every time I go to a campaign, people actually hire me to even be the art director.
Yeah.
Or when they get done, when they don't know how to move on from a concept, they're like, hey, Laretta, you could do it. You tell them, I don't know where we're going, but we're going to go ahead and let you do your thing. And most of the time when I do my thing, they actually take those pictures and use them.
Yeah.
So it's really great. But it's great to actually come to a point in your success story as a photographer where you don't have to lift a gear. You know what I'm saying?
Gear's heavy. Some gear's heavy. Absolutely.
Right. I'm a female photographer. I can't lift everything. You know what I'm saying? So I do need people who can assist me. Mm-hmm. But I feel like they're all part of the team. Like, it's just not about me. Mm-hmm. It's about the assistant because they're the ones who can read you and figure out what you want before you even say it to them.
Yeah.
I feel that is a great assistant to have.
Sure.
Like if they see a hot spot, I could just look at them. They're already there.
Yeah.
That is a great assistant.
Right.
If you could read me and know exactly my lighting, I would love you forever.
Yeah. It's invaluable, right? To have a good team.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
That's a great segue because, hey, we are doing a Canon podcast, right?
Right,
exactly. We are. So, Laretta, what gear do you use, or what gear, what's your go-to right now?
My favorite camera is the Canon EOS R5.
Yeah.
It is my first mirrorless, and boy, why didn't this come out earlier? Like, I can't live without a mirrorless now.
Yeah.
And it's great, especially when you shoot for products. I had a Mac campaign, the Mac makeup campaign, and I really had to go in there and shoot it, and really seeing it from the back of the camera was really good. I'm saying exactly what your product will look like. Mm-hmm. So it's been very helpful in my photography, in my fashion part of my photography. The autofocus, following the model when she jumps up and down, the tracking system on the camera is so freaking great.
The IAF.
Yes.
It's incredible, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
It feels like you're cheating almost, I
love it though.
Yeah. Oh, I'm saying the high praise.
Let me cheat. So so I use that. I own 2 R5s. I still have my 5D.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have it. I still also have my Mark III and 2.
Yeah.
But those are the cameras. My lens that I usually go to is 70 to 200. No, 24 to 70.
24 to 70. Okay.
Yeah, that is my go-to lens when I shoot campaigns. Mm-hmm. Most photographers shoot with a 24 to 70 on campaigns. Yeah, that's like my favorite lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I added the 50 millimeter to my arsenal. I have I think it's 15 to 35, can't remember. Mm-hmm. And so, those are like and I have the 100 macro. Mm. So the 100 macro I use a lot for my portraits and beauty shots. I do realize that when I don't use a 100 macro on mature people, just because you want to have a little bit more smoothness to their pores. 100 macro, it shows everything.
Everything.
All
even
the
details.
Earwax. It shows everything. So, if you ate something, I saw it that day, in Photoshop. I've learned certain lenses are for certain models or for certain people or certain celebrities or certain campaigns. I shoot 100 macro when it comes to products as well. If I'm shooting for a shoe company, 100 macro is great for coming up real close to shooting sandals or boots or, sneakers. Mm-hmm. So those are my, go-to lenses that I use a lot.
Pretty comprehensive, in the sense of like you'll be able to kind of tackle any project. At that point,
exactly. Right? I haven't got to the 7200 yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah. What about a 200 to 800 or I'm just
Oh my gosh. At that point it becomes landscape then. My model's lost.
Yeah, they're far off in the distance.
Yeah, exactly.
And funny enough, as a running joke with Tony as well too, we always talk about how we want to use a 200 or a 300 or 400 to do portraits, because again, it's like just the compression and the fall off. Again, trying new things,
right.
Which is kind of fun.
It's so weird because I had an assistant. Well, he's still my assistant, but I remember him talking about shooting portraits 2 years ago. And he was like, photographers use 7200 to do portraits, or headshots. Mm-hmm. I'm like, really? It's like, oh, you never knew that? I'm like, no. He said, I know because you've been shooting it with 2470. And photographers don't really shoot portraits with 2470. Yeah. But he said that's what makes you unique, mm-hmm. because you're not following the masses and what's correct, what they think correct focal points are, or the correct lens to use. You shoot your headshots and your portraits with 2470. And it literally I had an aha moment, for a second, is that exactly what lens they use? But I've just never used it. And I've used it several times. I just don't like it. Yeah. I don't know what it is. 85. It's not for me, mm-hmm. And there's a lot of photographers who use 85, even fashion photographers or beauty photographers. It's just not for me. Mm-hmm. Every lens is not going to be for you.
Right.
It's not specifically just why you need it, but does it feel good to you? Is it exactly what you want your work to look like? You know what I'm saying? So, I feel people forget that. Yeah. I'm going to get a 7200 because that's for portraits. Yeah, but did you try any other lenses?
Right. I mean, that's the reason why we make so many different lenses, too.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's all part of that creative process, to kind of choose and pick what you want to, what's in your arsenal at that point, your toolkit,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all part of being a photographer is to experiment with different cameras, different, lightings, different lenses, just that's the whole point of you being a creative photographer, is for you to take the gear that you have or get to know a gear that you want to shoot with and make it work.
I just want to kind of take a few steps back because I do want to hear from you of that important moment in your career, I'm assuming, is that phone call.
So, yes. So what happened is I was on vacation in Mexico. And
great place to vacation.
Yes, exactly. And I got this email at the airport, and it's like, "Hey, Laretta, we would like to talk to you about a project." And I'm like, "Who is this person?" Right? There was no signature at the end of the email or any of that. So I happened, how you click on somebody's email and get the extension of it, mm-hmm. and it said SI swimsuit. And I'm like, what? This can't be Sports Illustrated swimsuit, right? So I emailed them back, and it's like, you can't be Sports Illustrated swimsuit. This must be a scam. I was like, no, you guys are not emailing me. No. She's like, Laretta, we are real. We are real. This is Sports Illustrated swimsuit. Can we talk to you? And I'm like, okay, cool. So I got that phone call. They wanted to hire me to go to Bahamas to shoot. And I was really excited because not only was this talked about 10 years ago, right?
Right.
this was something that was totally different from my norm. And of course, you get to travel, right? So I remember them sending a black card to my apartment. So that was the first. I went into my very first lay down first class, where you press the button and you lay down. That was my first time ever being in first class doing that. So, and of course I had to wait until the lights turned off because I didn't exactly know what I was doing. So, I pretended like I knew everything until the lights went off. And they put me in my own villa in the Bahamas. So I had a 2-story villa. Wow. And I was overlooking the ocean. It was just a dream that you never thought that would ever happen to you. You see this on TV. You see this with other successful photographers, but you never thought it would be you, right? I even had my own golf cart, where I actually, kind of like crashed into some brushes several times. But hey, by the end of the trip, I was racing other assistants during, in the island. But anyway, so I was very excited when I was there. They told me that I would shoot Winnie Harlow. That was amazing because she was on my bucket list to shoot. And then we have Olivia and Kelsey, who was part Filipino. So that was great because I'm like, okay, she's from where I am. She was born there as well. Well, I don't know if she was born there, but she's from there, right? So the thing about shooting for Sports Illustrated Swimsuit is like you got to get up at 3:00 in the morning. Everything has to be shot before the sun gets high. Once the sun is high, then you take a break and then you come back in the evening. Mm-hmm. I didn't know exactly what their plan was on me. And I was like, okay, Laretta, whatever you want. What do you mean whatever I want? Whatever island you want to shoot on, it's yours. We're just taking directions from you. And I'm like, what do you mean you taking directions from me? Like, this is not normal, right? So any island that I want to shoot on, it was mine. It was mine. And I just never, ever had that feeling of whatever I want, it goes. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? There's always somebody's like, oh, this is not the right one or da-da-da. But it was great. So anyway, I shot Winnie. I shot Olivia and Kelsey. We would get up at 3:00 in the morning. We'd eat breakfast at 4, get on the boat by 5, get to the island by 6, set up by 7, model comes in at 7:15. Like, that was the hours that I would have to actually do every day. Mm-hmm. So this is what happened. So, of course, I've shot the 3 models that was already there. So I remember dropping off another model. We were dropping off a model, and I said, I'm looking at the call sheet, and there's an extra day here, but it says, NA. And I'm like, am I supposed to shoot another model? It's like, oh, no, you're not going to shoot another model, but we're not going to send you back to the U.S. for a couple days so you could just rest. I'm like, this is weird. This is really weird. So I was eating with the group of the PAs, assistants, people from Sports Illustrated Swimsuit, and I got a text say, hey, the creative director wants to see you, MJ. And I'm like, okay, let me go up here and see. So before I got that phone call, everybody was disappearing off the table. Like, it was like 15 of us, and then all of a sudden it got to 3. Everybody was getting off the table one by one at certain times. And I was like, this is just so weird. So anyway, I went to her villa, and as soon as I walked in, there were cameras on me. So there were like 3-4 cameras on me, and they were hooking up the microphone and everything. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is not me. Like, what's going on here, right? So I get up, and I see MJ at the table, and she said, oh, Laretta, this is normal, right? So we started filming, and she said, show me what you have for the concepts for the models. So I showed her the concept. She didn't even look at it. She was like, Laretta, the real reason I called you here is that you will be shooting the cover of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit. I'm like, oh, my God, this is amazing. And you will shoot Tyra. And I was like, what? You will shoot Tyra Banks for the cover. And I think I didn't have anything to say for about a good 30, 40 seconds. I was just in shock. And I'm like, you kidding me? It's like, nope, you're shooting Tyra Banks. And I started crying. Yeah. I bawled because everyone was looking at me, And I think I just had a shock moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm shooting this woman that I've been watching for years, since America's Top Model. But before that, when she would walk the runways. And I cried my heart out because this was an opportunity that I dreamt of. This is an opportunity that I never thought I would have. I said I was not going to cry. It was just a surreal moment, And so when it was the day came to shoot Tyra Banks, and it rained that morning.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, we had to cancel the trip that morning, and we really tried to do a rain dance, try to just, kind of get rid of the anxiety that it's not going to rain all day. Like, it's going to quit one of these times, right? So when it was time to shoot Tyra, it stopped raining. But we had a gust of wind that was really, hard on the beach. And I remember her coming in from the left of me, coming to our set. And I remember, Laretta, don't this up, okay? Don't mess this up, because this is either going to make you or you won't be another photographer ever again after this. You won't be a photographer after this. So I remember her coming, and I remember I took that first shot, and that was the first one that they put into the magazine.
Wow.
And I shot her the next day as well. And she came up and we were shooting, and I remember me crying. Like, I was trying to hold my tears. And I remember crying because I was just like, wow, I'm here in the Bahamas. I'm shooting for Sports Illustrated swimsuit, and I'm shooting for Tyra Banks. This is the lucky sprinkle. You know what I'm saying? This is luck sprinkle, okay? Yeah. The sprinkle of luck. And I remember her looking at me. She said, are you crying? I was like, yes, I'm crying. I'm so sorry. And they all gave me a group hug. Yeah. And I never looked back since then.
Yeah.
After that shoot, she has hired me to shoot for her model land that she opened up in Santa Monica. And she actually referred me to ABC to shoot for Dancing with the Stars. I shot her whole campaign. And I was so nervous because this is one of the biggest TV spots I've had to shoot. And I did not want to disappoint Tyra. I mean, she trusted me to do Sports Illustrated swimsuit. She should trust me to do ABC. And then since then, I've shot several campaigns for her. The latest has been Karen Millen. And they're straight out of London, but they shot, Tyra Banks here in LA. And, I had my first campaign on the billboard in New York Times Square. And it's not my first billboard, but it's the first one there.
Yeah.
And you made as a photographer if you got like a billboard in New York Times Square.
Sure.
And they were all in London on the cars, in the tunnels, like it was just everywhere. And it felt like that moment I had when the Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover came out.
Yeah.
I really, in my mind, was thinking like, what if they didn't, pick my picture for the cover? What if, they decided to trash my photography? I remember when it came out, the website crashed. Everybody like flocked to the whole photo shoot for Tyra Banks. And I remember when it came out, I cried in the bed. It was 6 a.m, and I think I cried for about good 45 minutes.
That was an important photo. It really was.
Because I knew that this photo shoot was going to make me a better photographer. It was a success story for me, coming from being on the streets, being in foster care to where I am now. This was my success story.
Right.
And she was a part of it. You know what I'm saying? So I remember the phone calls, the texts. I mean, it was just overwhelming for me. And then she was communicating back and forth with me, and she said, hey, Laretta, her assistant, text me or text me, and she said, Laretta, tune in to Trevor Noah's show tonight. We got a surprise for you. I'm like, what? What's going on here? So I, started watching Trevor, and, she came on stage and she was talking about, her coming back into Sports Illustrated swimsuit and, being on the cover again. And so he asked her, where did you find this photographer? She said, I found her on Instagram. And, so the power of social media is very, very important to be out there for people to recognize who you are. And I remember her looking into the camera and say, Laretta, just her saying my name, like, Laretta, you see me? You see? And I remember just like crying when I saw her on TV and mentioning my name. Now, exactly, it wasn't like that, but she literally looked into the camera and was like, Laretta. Yeah. And as the first person in a very long time that vouched for me.
Yeah.
As a female photographer, as a Black photographer, and used her platform to elevate me. Mm-hmm. And I will always love her for that.
Absolutely.
Always.
That's amazing.
And for someone of that caliber, as a supermodel, as someone who's, a businesswoman, right. Someone who, I've looked up to for so many years, tell you that you can be on Vogue, you can be on all these magazines, and she was the one who found me on Instagram. So never, ever neglect the part that your work would never be found on social media, because social media is very powerful.
It can happen, right?
Right.
I mean, but yeah, it's like, that's such an important, that's why I definitely wanted to make sure we hit on that story, because even I'm like a little crying too. I'm like, my goodness,
I have so many things throughout my career that I can cry about.
Yeah. Great
things have happened to me where I just sit back and it's like, wow, like I was a part of this. Mm-hmm. Someone trusted me. These people who hired me for campaigns, they trusted me.
Yeah.
And I think at this part of my career now that I'm almost 19 years in, it's my turn to return to giving to other photographers, showing them my skills, answering their questions, inspiring them to be more than who they think they are, because we have room to grow. And I think it's my due diligence to break the doors for other female photographers to get to shoot campaigns and celebrities where they were never, ever shown. Mm-hmm. It is my due diligence to share my knowledge with other photographers. The whole point of being a photographer, not just always sharing your creativity and your work, but also giving back to the community that built you as a photographer as well.
Yeah. Sharing your wealth of knowledge and your story, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go.
There we go. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I mean, realistically, it's like, how can we can't really top that. I mean, that's such a great story. But where can everybody online and the socials, where can they find more information about you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Laretta Houston, not with an O, Laretta in Houston, like Houston, Texas. On Instagram, LarettaHouston.com, my website.
Again, can't say enough how incredible this moment has been to share your story with us. I mean, so thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I was just sitting here with a friend, just talking over my life path as a photographer in my living room.
Yeah. Thanks for coming here. And again, so thanks everybody for tuning in. This Laretta Houston, folks. I mean, what else can we say? And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Salamat.
Salamat.